keeping with the theme of the opening monologue, here is another story that didn't get nearly as much media attention as it should. In my checkered past, at one point, for a long time actually, I worked for AIG, not in that little division where everybody became millionaires and billionaires, but I did work for them as a technical expert and running a few things. And so it is with special interest that I read this story. It comes from Americans for Financial Reform, good folks, allies of ours in the good fight. The Financial Stability Oversight Council, or FSOC, voted to rescind its designation of AIG as a systemically important financial institution, or SIFI. Now, that's a lot of numbers, but here's what it really means. What it really means is that after the financial crisis, we decided that institutions whose mismanagement and collapse would threaten the global economy needed to follow some extra strict rules. Now, the Stability Oversight Council has decided that AIG no longer needs that qualification, that they no longer pose a threat to the global financial system. Now, that's odd, as Americans for Financial Reform points out. That's really odd because AIG hasn't really changed. Now, remember that AIG needed a $182 billion bailout, but I'm looking now at the numbers for AIG. When it was a structurally dangerous institution, it had about, I'm trying to look at it now, 550 billion. And now in total assets, now it's got just under 500 billion. Now, how does that make you not be dangerous? Total liabilities, 450 billion, now about 425 billion. In other words, it goes on and all sorts of measurements. It hasn't really changed, and yet somehow our regulators have decided that it's no longer a systemic threat. That makes me worry. You know who else worries about this kind of thing? William Dudley. Now, William Dudley is not exactly what I would call a lefty. He is the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. He is a relatively conservative banker in many ways, but even Mr. Dudley is worried that we are going too far and rolling back the financial reforms, which in my opinion were not nearly good enough, but the financial reforms put in place after the 2008 crisis. Now, why is that a big deal? It's a big deal because that means we could have another crisis. And this time around, it could be many times worse than the last time was. Now, Mr. Dudley was also prescient in that he explained in an October 2014 speech that the culture of the financial services industry is perverse and wrong and distorted because the leaders of our large banks are not punishing wrongdoers, they're rewarding them.